Our main one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good morning, everybody. This is Tony with Rebel Financial. It's great to see you again. Happy Friday. We finally have a good sunny day here in our rainforest of Columbus. So today we have a great guest, Mikaela Hunt of Mikaela Media. And so we're going to talk about a number of things, but thank you for joining us.
Tony, thank you for having me. It was great to be asked.
No, it's different to have somebody who has been on this side of the camera a lot more than I have, because most people don't have this type of experience. So I want to talk about a number of things. One, under your umbrella of Mikaela Media, you've done a number of things. But what's most interesting to me, and I think will be applicable for a lot of people out there, is the change that you went through, an abrupt change, and having to make a big career change.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start with that. In 2015, you were told they weren't going to renew your contract, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we talked about that a little bit, but explain, that process and the change and things.
So after about 17 years working in TV news, we had a management change on two levels at the station that I was working at. And I didn't know until I was 30 days out from contract renewal that I wasn't going to get renewed. I actually thought I was being walked upstairs to get renewed, and instead we took a left to HR, which is always great. And, they didn't really explain why. It was very quickly cut off. And all of a sudden, after spending so much time investing in that career and what I believed in when it came to journalism and community, I didn't know what I was going to do next. They attempted to hold me under a non-compete, and then 60 days later, after I'd already come up with what I was going to do, I found out the non-compete wasn't legally valid.
Yeah, and I don't mean to, that was what was crazy to me. The contract wasn't renewed, and by the way, you can't do anything to compete against
Unbelievable.
it. So then you had to think about what you're going to do next, right? And so what was that process like as you transitioned to what you're doing now?
We didn't want to leave Columbus. My husband and I didn't, and he was actually still working at that same station. And so we were trying to figure out what it would look like to stay if I couldn't work in TV, as I thought I wouldn't be able to. So I started meeting with probably a person every weekday to talk about my strengths and what I thought I could do well. And I came up with this concept, or I shouldn't say I came up with it, but I learned about this concept and came up with what I was going to do called brand journalism. Mm-hmm. And things got rolling, and within 60 days I'd started my LLC to help brands tell authentic stories using that journalistic eye that I have.
Right, that's great. Well, and I had told you I had gone through one of those abrupt changes, and it's, for number one, from a financial planning point of view, that's why it's so important to make sure that you are somewhat stable, because if you're not, it can really throw your life into disarray. But it sounds like you were in a position where you had the ability where you could do something different, and you had to educate yourself a little bit and then grow into that.
But it was by the skin of my teeth. I mean, I had never applied for unemployment, and all of a sudden our family income was cut in half. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know how to navigate in that world at all. All I knew was that I knew how to tell stories. I knew how to dig a story out of a person through interviews, and I needed to do something with that. So I think my husband gave me about 6 months, and so did my time looking for jobs via ODJFS, that I was able to take that 6 months to really develop what I was going to do, which was nice. Otherwise, we didn't lean heavily on any nest egg that we had. We just had kids. They were in full-time daycare. I mean, things are tight during that time of life.
Right, they are for everybody. So that was about 3 years ago now, a little over.
4.
So when you said 6 months out, how much is that different compared to what you're doing today? Like how much? And not necessarily, of course, the business has changed, but how much, what the direction that you thought you would go in compared to the direction today that you're going in?
Actually, not much. Because of one exercise that I did, I found out that I wasn't getting renewed on a Thursday, and then on a Monday I went in and talked to a friend who was also a great business coach. I had not hired him at that point. I actually didn't hire him until a couple years after the fact. But he asked me a question that day, Tony, that leads to everything I'm doing now, still to this day. He asked me the question, what 5 things would make your day great? And based on that answer, I was able to pull away from maybe the identity that I had within news to the things that were part of news that I loved, and I was able to think about how I could apply them outside of traditional news. So that question, that was so important, and what I'm doing today actually looks a lot like I thought what I would be doing.
What you want to do.
Around
and you're really
that
enjoying
time.
it.
I've loved it, and people have understood the concept, and they have seen it work, my clients have, within their worlds, which has been amazing.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about the concept then. What, in a nutshell, is, brand journalism? Because, and just, what we talked about is so many people start a business because they're really good at something, and they just don't get so many other things, but they don't know that. And so how important, what is brand journalism? How is that going to help them?
So brand journalism is literally telling that authentic story of your organization or company. So really digging in and doing the work to find those, I call them nuggets of information that you want to share with your audience. The difference between traditional journalism and brand journalism is that in traditional journalism, there's a pretty wide audience, right? There's key demos. Like in TV, the key demo is women 25 to 54, if you really want to nail down on the demo that's going to be buying for advertisers. For you, for other organizations, your audience is your customers and your potential customers. And so that demo or that avatar looks a bit different than more of a wide, general, journalistic one, right? So when it comes to that, you have to think about the stories that that audience needs to hear, information that they need, ways they need to be enlightened. So you have to think about the problems they have, and then what solutions you provide, and then talk about that in an authentic way through video and what you're sharing on social media. So it's really content curation with that in mind, Plus, I think newsjacking is really important. And have you ever heard that term before?
I have not,
So hijacking today's headlines that apply to your industry, right? So traditional news from time to time will have information that applies to whatever you're doing. I know you guys feel it here, and many other industries are the same. So how can you take today's headlines and actually put your spin on them for your audience and be a thought leader? So in essence, that's what brand journalism is. It's a combination of those two things.
Okay, all right. And so, addition to that, you have, you're still behind the camera, so to speak, with the podcast with Cbuzz, which is why we had you here, but also on 610 Radio. So let's talk about Cbuzz first. Let's talk about what that is.
Well, the Columbus Chamber of Commerce came to me and said, we think you would be the perfect person to reboot this podcast with. So Cbuzz really focuses on business innovators in Central Ohio and what exactly they're doing and how they've grown their business and the lessons learned along the way. So as a former journalist who loves to interview folks, it's easy for me to grab those stories out of them, right, and get them to talk about them. But also on top of that, I have this unique aspect of my life now as a business owner, right? So now I look at things even as I'm interviewing people a little bit differently. So they had the opportunity to reboot the podcast, and they asked me if I would do it, and I said I would love to, because it was right in my wheelhouse between being a business owner who's interested in scaling and innovators here in the Columbus area. Yeah.
Well, in Columbus really is you and I are both from Illinois. I'm from Chicago. You're from Central. Columbus is really growing in a lot of different areas, a lot of technology and things like that. And so it is important to get it, there's no perfect, but to do a good job of it, So we have a lot of great people, I think, leading us right now.
We do. And I was really involved in Startup Week, and I kind of wonder if that's the reason that they came to me for Cbuzz. I had hosted the main stage at the event for a couple of years and really got to dig into some of the struggles that startups go through and the lessons learned there. So I feel like it was kind of a natural flow from doing that to helping out with Cbuzz.
Okay. So that is completely business, and let's talk about what you do with Mindy on 610.
Yeah,
so
Mindy Dreyer, longtime Westerville resident and longtime anchor on NBC4, so we're both alums here in Central Ohio. We talk about multi-generational family issues, right? So, for instance, coming up this weekend, we're going to talk about the crisis that farmers are going through. These farmers are our neighbors, and the fact that 68% of the corn has been planted at this point and not 100%, that's a problem. And it's going to ultimately impact us at the grocery store, you and I. So that's one of the conversations we're going to have this weekend. But on top of that, we're going to talk a little bit about, okay, it's time to redo your bathroom. Where do you start, right? So we have the opportunity to do storytelling in a couple of different ways through that show that applies to families, all generations.
Okay. Are you behind you're not behind a microphone the whole time, you're out and about some, or what is that?
We are mostly, we're mostly just in studio behind the microphone. Sometimes we will tape segments out and about, so to speak. But for the most part, we have it's a 2-hour show.
Okay.
Sunday afternoons.
I'll come back to this about Cbuzz. So really, they can tune in at 6:10 at 4 o'clock on Sundays.
4 to 6
right?
on Sundays, yes.
Okay,
Thank you for the plug.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Well, let's plug also Cbuzz. How do they find those podcasts?
So Cbuzz is on the Chamber of Commerce's website, so columbuschamber.org, I believe. And there are the episodes from when they started it back in 2015, and then the reboot as well. We tape those once every 3 or 4 months, but they slowly put them out, one a month, I want to say.
Right. No, that's kind of cool. So, all right. So now I want to come back to Mikaela Media, and you have a good website. I know you're complaining
Thank you.
It's not as up to date as you want to be, but it still is very good and really illustrates, a lot about the business. So we encourage people to go to MikaelaHunt.com. And Eileen, let's just take a look at it real quick so we can show people a little bit about what that looks like. But here you go, telling your story. You use the keyword, I think, is authentic, right? I always think when I see salespeople, and we're all salespeople, those that change the most are probably the worst salespeople, right? I mean, when they're not authentic. So being authentic is important, and you had said that before. So
because people identify with you when you're being vulnerable and authentic, in those moments. I just feel like you're human.
Right, and that's what telling your story is, right? I mean, it's telling your story and how you go about things. So that's a little bit, and what is useful here is obviously how you can help people and what you can do for them. So, the brand journalism, on camera and voiceover talent. What is this?
So basically, that I've helped with commercials across Columbus from time to time. So we just did something with Honda Marysville, and Bruce over there. I love Bruce. He really has a heart for giving. And so we just did a fun on camera, a commercial with him. Mindy and I did. Voiceover can be radio commercials, so people from time to time have hired me for that. Okay. It's not been the bread and butter of the business, but it's a part of what I do.
Sure, you do it, right? Yeah. Just like you're a public speaker and things like that. So. The social media, we talked about that a little bit. It is interesting because I feel myself tuning out. I guess I follow Twitter more than a lot of the other ones, but I look at Facebook a lot less than I used to. So it's really important that you have a very good social media message, and that
it is. And it's always evolving. I mean, I think what you're doing with Facebook right now, I think a lot of other people are doing, because we are overwhelmed by the amount. Just the sheer amount of messages. So you have to be really savvy about what you're doing on those platforms. And if you're not doing video, you're doing it wrong. Because video is actually the way most organically to get in front of people. I even think that sometimes sponsored posts on Facebook aren't landing exactly on the target that you necessarily want them to land on when you pick out your target audience. So I truly think that video is the way to go, and more people need to start doing it for their brands, which sounds crazy because you would think that everybody's doing it, but not everybody is, or they're not doing it well. They don't have a plan. I've really talked with companies about putting together a video communications plan. Just like you would put together like a marketing plan or a Marcom plan, put together a video communications plan for your fiscal year. And that way kind of the themes that you need to be able to cover as the year goes.
Yeah. Well, and that is important, right? Because oftentimes you're just there for the next few weeks, and then you're not thinking about what you're doing beyond then. So it's good to have that long-term plan. Let's talk, before I go on to this, and it was probably on here, I'm just forgetting where, but here we go, teaching and speaking. So I know you've done some TED Talks and things like that. So how can somebody find you or use you, to do a speaking engagement?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I just started, so TEDx was an awesome opportunity to be able to talk about abrupt change and how to handle transition from someone who had no clue how to do it, and it was at least public locally what I was going through. People will sometimes ask me to give this talk. I actually just gave it for the BBB in a women's group the other night. So that's one of the talks I give, but the other one I give is really about what brand journalism and storytelling looks like for organizations. And I'm about to do that one. I just did it. I actually did it for the Ohio Society of CPAs a couple of days ago, and I will do it in a couple of weeks for a bunch of nonprofits at the Columbus Foundation. It's really about hacking into your content as a company and where to look and how to treat it. If you were a reporter and if you were a producer and you were looking at your company, how would you dig into what content you have? because there are places you don't know where you can get great information inside your company that is perfect for your audience. So that's the other talk that I give, but it's teaching as well, you know. So it's talking about how to dig for the information, and then I believe in batch creation and something called content value over time. And so I teach how to do that in an effective way that I think works on social media.
Okay, great. And then lastly, mompreneur. Am I saying that correctly?
I haven't touched this, I will say this, in a long time. So I'm a writer, and like that's the reason I got into actually TV news, which might sound strange, but I love to write.
Okay.
And so I needed a place to be able to blog when I kind of started things off, and I felt like I was a mom who was an entrepreneur, so that's how Mompreneur Musings came about.
That's
because
awesome.
People knew me for, you know, the fact that I had kids, I was working in news, and all of a sudden I wasn't working in news, so I needed a place to be able to talk about some of those things that go on in our lives as parents.
Yeah. So I know what you're saying. You haven't done this in a little bit, but still there's some good ones here that people can come back and do some
Well,
of those
thank
blogs.
you.
Yeah, no problem. And then lastly, besides the contact information, this is just a little bit about the 610 show, right? That's basically what this is.
So when you have different things you do, right, you want to have a feed into the main space. And so this is where I feed in. So you can go to iHeart's app and go to 610wtvn.com to get the show. But I like to have it fed into my website because that's a part of the multiple spindles that I have in my life.
Right.
Yeah.
And you have a number of things going on. So let's talk about real quick, because it interests me that you said Columbus has the biggest group of the National Association of Women's Business Owners. Is that right? So you're part of that as well, and Columbus is obviously thriving with that.
Yeah, so I'm part of the board of directors for that, and it's amazing that we do have the most engaged, the largest group here, even more so than Orange County, which I always find kind of fascinating. So I think we've really built a group within, the board of directors itself, but also the group itself, of supporting and fostering women in business. Not just, doing business with one another, but actually going out there and speaking, in front of the legislature about women business certification, having a seat at the table. We just met with Governor DeWine in the past few days. I was not there, but other folks were, to talk about what's needed for women business owners in the state of Ohio. So we are advocates for women business owners on a legislative level, and I think that's really important.
Yeah. I think it's crazy that Columbus, I think it shows how much it's growing, that we're the largest one. So
yes.
And then the last thing before we wrapped up, you have something new is happening, right?
Yeah, so based on this whole brand journalism model and what I've been doing with clients for the last 4 years, I've been pursued for jobs. I wasn't really looking for anything, but I am getting ready to start a new job in July as a chief communications officer for one of the departments within the state, because they want to look at communications from this brand journalism lens. So I'm super excited about doing it, and I can't wait to see what's next, because I think there's going to be a lot of great things to do for the state.
Yeah, but you'll still be helping people, and they could still.
Yeah, that's the beauty, I guess. So what matters will continue. Cbuzz will continue. There's not a conflict of interest, and I'll be able to help some clients too.
Yeah.
So I'm keeping Mikaela Media around, but my sole focus is going to be, I should say, 8 to 5 focus is going to be for the state of Ohio.
Well, I find it funny because I asked you how June was going, and you said, well, you've been super busy in June, and now you're going to be taking on more endeavors too. So June's going to seem like a big picnic eventually.
Right? Which I can't believe it. That's crazy that this month would have been a picnic, because it feels like it hasn't. But I've been traveling a lot for work.
Okay. Well, we appreciate you coming on. One, I need to mention, we want and need some subscribers. So if you're going to subscribe to YouTube, you can get in our weekly contest to win an Echo Dot. So please do that. Just go to YouTube and hit subscribe. It's nice and easy for Rebel Financial. Also look for Mikaela and see where you could find her on social media as well. But well, listen, thank you.
Tony, thank you.
I don't know how we got a lot in a short period. So
you're a good interviewer.
I appreciate it. Well, you were great to interview. So, but thank you, everybody. Have a great week. Phil will be sitting here next week. Enjoy the rest of June. Take care.